What's going on, YouTube? So with season 2 just around the corner, I thought I would give everyone make a Nazestra's Devotion video. Why Nazestra's Devotion? Well, there are two reasons specifically. One is Sharen is coming out and there is no better descendant to use Nazestra's Devotion other than Sharen, which I'll go into later. And Nazestra's Devotion is actually a good gun. That being said, if you are going to ask me which standalone gun is better, Nazestra's Devotion or the Perforator, I will tell you that the Perforator in a 1-on-1 contest will win out of damage every time. But Nazestra's Devotion gets benefits with group play. So if you plan on playing a group or you have friends to play with, Nazestra's Devotion is going to be better for Sharen specifically, and we'll go into that. So here we have the Nazestra's Devotion. I will go into why this one is better for Sharen specifically. You can see that the Nazestra's Devotion comes with a defense down of 30%. This 30% does stack with other abilities, and typically whenever you employ this 30%, you get around 10 to 15% more damage on firearms. So the first hit from Nazestra's Devotion on a crit does 519,000. The second hit with the debuff active does 572,000. The 572,000 is thanks to the floating debuff of 30% down on the Farseer's hit points, which you can see the buff constantly reactivate every time I shoot the gun. So the difference in this case, 519,000 to 572,000 is 10%. 10% will fluctuate based off of how much defense the enemy actually has. The higher in defense the enemy goes, the less percentage of an increase you'll get out of it, just because there is diminishing returns on defense whether you go up or down from the top. Now, why is Nazestra's Devotion better for Sharen? Sharen has a transcendent module called Battlesuit Melting Rounds. Battlesuit Melting Rounds inflicts a 40% defense decrease amount, and whenever you stack it with the Nazestra's Devotion, which it does stack, that 572,000 goes to 700,000. And this is a 35% increase in damage going from the original 519,000 as long as you use the Battlesuit Melting Rounds, and a 35% increase in firearm damage. To anyone that shoots an enemy, you are effectively adding 1.25 firearms into the damage rotation with just Sharen and Battlesuit Melting Rounds with Naz. In addition, if you build Nazestra's Devotion, end up doing your own damage, which is not nothing. It is a very good amount of damage. Now, there are more damaging things you can do as a standalone person if you're soloing, but if you're in a group with team play that's everyone's using firearms, you will get more out of the Nazestra's Devotion. Now on to the build. So for the rolls on Naz, if you want the most output out of Naz, you're going to want a firearm attack increase. Definitely a critical hit damage bonus because the base is so high, and weak point damage bonus. Now for the last one, you can really slot in anything you want to. Chill attack I find is very useful from a utilitarian purpose, because if you do in fact chill an enemy, you slow them down and prevent them from actually dealing that much damage to you. The status effect trigger rate on Naz isn't that great at 16%, so you would have to hit an enemy to actually chill them anyway. So for the Naz, I would not recommend that. Firearm critical hit damage, firearm attack, weak point damage is the basics, and it comes with a 45% critical hit rate. So you can really get your critical hit rate up with this. Having a roll of 10% of critical hit rate on your Naz will net you about 4.5% extra critical hit rate. And seeing as how the build does 4 times the damage, that is 5% of 300%, which is 15% extra damage just on that one roll. This 5% critical hit rate on a roll is increased by modules that you equip. So the 15% can range anywhere from 15% to 20% extra damage, depending on your build. You can definitely slot utilitarian purposes over this. I do not find 15% that big of a deal. But if you're going to be bossing with this, like I assume a lot of people are, you are just going to want bonus firearm on Colossus. An extra 10,000 bonus firearm attack on Colossus on the Naz will net you about a 25% damage return whenever you're shooting a Colossi. In the meantime, I will actually be stuck here in rerolling death, as we all are. So in actuality, I have Real Life Fighter equipped on the gun most of the time, so it will do more damage than 500,000 and 700,000 damage respectively. I just had it off for testing purposes because it's really hard to get the stack difference whenever you're testing. So if we were to put on Real Life Fighter, add Battlesuit Melting Rounds to the stack, we would get a total of 1,060,000 damage per round on level 100 enemies. So for modules, I do have to say concentration priority over bullet integration is much stronger. For anyone that does not know, bullet integration gives you firearm attack and firearm critical hit damage, but concentration priority, if you have a high enough base crit on the gun, gives you way more damage than putting in firearm attack. You can think of it this way. The base firearm critical hit damage of Naz is 2.25. Think of the base firearm attack as 1, and think of the firearm critical hit damage as 2.25 multiplier. So would you rather have 35% damage of a 2.25 multiplier or a percentage damage increase of a 1x multiplier? It really depends on how big the firearm critical hit damage is, which times you should use bullet integration. In this way, you should definitely use concentration priority. It will give you a lot more damage. Then we have weak point side and have aiming once again because of the multipliers. Our weak point damage is sitting at 2.9. You can get, and on base, the weak point damage is 1.7. Then we have action and reaction. This is just going to be the best firearm attack increase module. People are shied away from the recoil, but honestly, I ain't afraid of no recoil. Then better concentration and better insight are just the best blue critical modules. They have no type, so they don't prevent you from equipping a firearm critical hit damage module or a firearm critical hit rate module, which would typically go here, but in this case, expand weapon charge does give you more damage. Then we have fire rate, because fire rate is just a direct 25% increase of fire rate. And then of course, rifling reinforcement, which should basically go on every single gun. Now, the parts that are up to you, we have Real Life Fighter here. Real Life Fighter will attribute most damage out of all of the special modules. The reason Real Life Fighter will do this is just because it gives you 100% attack at maximum stacks. Whenever the damage actually counts is whenever you have downed a Colossus or whenever you're in a damage phase. Whenever you're typically in a damage phase, it is actually difficult to miss weak point shots. So I do believe Real Life Fighter is the call here. However, if you wanted to go to payout instead, payout will give you a 16% damage increase in your overall damage rotation, as opposed to Real Life Fighter will give you much more. But really, this is not for solo play. Like I said, I could go and fight a Colossus and shoot him and barely kill him after much trying, but that's not what this is for. If you're curious to see if this is even effective, honestly, the world record speed runs with Gluttony pre-nerf actually was attributed to the Sharen debuff. It was 3 glaze and 1 Sharen. Whenever you have 3 glaze and you're effectively adding another glaze into the rotation whilst also doing damage yourself, you can really get a lot of damage in. With the advent of Ultimate Sharen coming, I do not think Battlesuit Melting Rounds will see any sort of removal. If anything, it will just get better. A note on defense, you cannot reduce any stat through any method more than 80% of its original value. With Nazestra's Devotion and the Battlesuit Melting Rounds, you will decrease it 70%, and then there are a couple other ways that you could get the final 10%, but I do not believe that that's really worth it. If you're going to use Sharen in this way, I do also recommend you bring an Enduring Legacy, just in case you don't always want to rely on a hand cannon. Hand cannons are great. Sometimes you just need more damage throughput. I'm not going to go over Sharen builds because I'm just going to wait for Ultimate Sharen to do that. Check out my channel if you like the way I do content. Consider subscribing. Y'all have a sick day. Enjoy Season 2. There is a ton of stuff. If you're interested in seeing how any of that stuff is going to play out, let me know in the comments. Have a sick day and peace out.